What's up, good people? My name's AJ. We're working on the weekend like usual, and you are watching Straight Talks. If you're liking any of the content, just want to ask you to subscribe to the channel and like this video, or leave a comment down below for any other topics you want to see discussed in future videos. I appreciate all that stuff, and let's keep it going. Today I'm doing a follow-up to probably the only controversial video I have so far, which is the IQ score as it relates to being able to pass the CFA exams. Just as a quick summary, my general point throughout that video was that I think there's a minimum IQ that any person needs to be able to pass level 2 or level 3 CFA exams just in general. I don't think that someone with a 70 IQ or 80 IQ could pass them even with, I think I said 5 years of study or 10 years of study in that video, and I think that's still to be true. But basically the point of this video is just to address some of the comments I got from the last video, mostly from people disagreeing with me on the premise that there is a certain minimum threshold of IQ that a person would need to have at least to be able to pass the exams. First, let me just start off and say that I am pleasantly surprised by the general sentiment of the dissenting comments that I got, or comments, that were disagreeing with my position there. And the reason I say that is not that I know CFA charter holders that are, cocky or kind of think they're better than other people. But when I made the video, I was thinking that most people would be agreeing with my point, and I think people should agree with my point because I still think it's correct. But just in general, I thought the sentiment would be, yeah, I'm taking the CFA exams, or I passed the CFA exams. This guy's totally right. You do have to be pretty smart, and I'm pretty smart, so that's how I was able to pass the exams, or that's why I'm in the program, that's why I think I can pass, and things like that. Those aren't necessarily negative comments, but it's just a little bit more of a confident or cocky perspective to take towards participating in the CFA program. And that's what I thought most of the comments would be. But I got a lot of responses about the power of hard work and determination, and that anyone can accomplish anything. So that's why I say I appreciate the general sentiment. It was a little bit surprising to me. I think it showed that the people watching my videos were kind of optimistic about anyone being able to do this thing, which is a really cool perspective to take, especially if you are participating in the program and maybe you don't think you're in the top 2% of IQ intelligence scores. But that being said, there were like 4 or 5 comments at least that I just totally disagree with, without necessarily bringing on controversy towards myself. I wanted to address those and kind of just point out, again, maybe explain a little bit more of where I was coming from, and then point out why I think those specific comments were not true. So I'll list a few specific comments, but again, I want to reiterate this one point, which is that my general premise is that there is a certain minimum IQ threshold that exists for someone to be able to pass the CFA exams, and I speculated as to what that threshold might be. I think I said 120 IQ points, that is. But anyway, I didn't claim to know exactly what that threshold is, just that there has to be one because of the level of difficulty with those exams. So on that basic premise, I know that I'm right. You really can't refute the point that someone through whatever ailment or disability they might have that has an IQ of 50 or something like that would be able to pass the exams. It's just not realistic. There just are people out there that can't comprehend basic math, basic reading, things like that. So if you start at the most basic of levels, yeah, there has to be some minimum threshold. That's just a given. That's 100%. Now, there can totally be a debate on where that threshold's at, and it sounds like I'm going to be on the spectrum of arguing at a higher level. I would certainly say it's above 100 IQ, which is the average intelligence across people that live on the earth. I would probably like to have a little more meaningful discussion on where that break even could potentially be. The point of that last video is just that I know that there is one. I'm just going to go through the comments here. Dude, this is hilarious. Average people have been passing the CFA for years. Your research was pretty much just your inner circle, and that was about it. Hard to make a case for the point you're trying to make. So he's wrong. My research is not just my inner circle. The research that I cited in that video was a study of the ACT scores coming out of high school on average for those who passed the CFA exams, and the average was 27. So an ACT score of 27 puts you somewhere within the top 10th percentile, I think the top 8% or so, and you could probably just find that online too. Right away, we know just by data that the average person passing the CFA exam is not an average intellect person, which would be IQ 100. They're within the top 10%, which would be IQ of, I think, 123 plus. Now, this person's point about my inner circle was probably referring to the comment that I made that I know of people out there in the world who just can't pass the exam. And when people make the argument that, oh, anyone could pass the exam as long as they spend enough time, I said that most of those people making that argument probably don't spend enough time just hanging out with people who are less than 100 IQ, probably people who are probably a little bit below average intelligence. And I said in the video that when you spend a good deal amount of time with people like that, you'd really understand that they just wouldn't be able to pass the CFA exams if you have taken the exams and you know what goes into being able to pass those. So I think that's what the mention is there towards my inner circle of friends, but that isn't what I based my main argument off of. That was just some anecdotal points I made. The primary argument is that ACT score study. Okay, here's the next one. I spent 7 years with PwC. Believe it or not, I've actually seen CFA charter holders who are not that smart at all, at least not from the first sight. Some of them struggle to socialize. Being able to spend 600 hours preparing for one exam means you're deprived, which inevitably leads to a lot of psychological struggles. If this is the case, less educated colleagues, superior language proficiency, and entrepreneurial spirit can indeed make a chance of passing. Two things that are wrong with this comment I'll point out here. I have actually seen CFA charter holders who are not that smart. That is totally anecdotal, and that's probably just his personal opinion. The premise of my original video was that they have to have a certain minimum IQ score, and so unless you know the IQ of the people that you're talking about in this comment, you wouldn't be able to refute the point that I was making in the past video. And then the second point here I just thought was a little bit odd, but that studying for 600 to 800 hours creates deprivation and psychological struggles. It's definitely mentally taxing, but I certainly wouldn't agree that across the board studying for the CFA exams results in anything that I would characterize as psychological struggles. So maybe some other charter holders out there would agree with this gentleman, and if you've gone through the program and you would classify yourself as having had dealt with some psychological struggles, then I totally feel for you, but I'm sure that that's not the consensus. Next one. Sorry pal, your video is irrelevant. I don't believe that there's such a thing as average people, but I believe in lazy people. IQ is BS. If you set your mind to anything, you'll do it. And if anyone puts in the time and effort needed to have it, period. It's not rocket science. So this is kind of the comment that I mentioned that I'm appreciative of at the start of this video, because it has that go get 'em attitude, anyone can accomplish anything type thing. But it's just unequivocally wrong. The first thing that he mentioned, when there are no average people, is incorrect. The IQ score has broadly been used as the best way to measure intelligence in the human brain for a pretty good period of time, and while it's not a totally perfect system, it's pretty close at measuring the intelligence quotient of an individual. So there certainly are average people on that scale of IQ. You can test everyone in the world on the IQ test, and there's going to be an average group of people who score near 100. So there are average people. And then kind of just further refuting from what I've mentioned earlier, but if anyone sets his mind to anything, he'll do it. Just not true. Someone with an IQ of 60 cannot pass a PhD doctorate in physics from Harvard, or just some mentally taxing and extremely challenging academic program. So unfortunately, also one of the comments I saw was, hey, this is depressing, and that I don't want it to be. I realize where this could sound that way, and unfortunately, it's kind of the unfortunate reality. I really don't want to sound that way, but if that is the way I'm sounding with the example I just gave, so be it. I just have to point it out to answer this comment. And the last one that I'll point out here, being smart helps, but you don't really have to be that smart to pass these. The math here is nothing on the level of pure mathematics. At the highest level, anyone with a PhD in quantum physics would blow through all 3 levels of these. I would agree that someone with a PhD in quantum physics could pass all 3 levels. But when they say you don't really have to be that smart, that is kind of the area that I'd like to discuss maybe a little bit more in the comments on this video, which is, how smart do you think someone has to be? I took the stand that the IQ would have to be around 120. But when you say that smart, how smart are we talking? There's a scale that we can use to compare these things rather than just using general phrases. So I'm interested to hear where other people think the minimum IQ level might fall to be able to pass all 3 CFA exams. So again, I thought the last video was pretty cool, even though it was a bit of a controversy. Oh, it's definitely my most disliked video as well. I didn't mention that, but unfortunately, I still think that I'm right here, and there were a few people in the last video that agreed with me too, so those people, feel free to comment down in this video and tell the other people why they're wrong. But let's hash it out. What level does someone have to be on the IQ scale to be able to pass all 3 CFA exams, and most specifically levels 2 and 3? Thanks for watching.